Bring it on in rivalry week in college football. And Joe, this is one of the more anticipated rivalry weeks I think I've had a lot up for grabs still in terms of the college football playoff, whether we're talking just individual matchups. The Michigan-Ohio State saga is going to definitely steal the show, but Texas A&M, I think, still intriguing. Vanderbilt, Tennessee. We're going to talk about the five, I think, biggest and best matchups of the week, but there's a ton of matchups. If you're a college football fan, a college football nerd, and you want to dive into everything, I found a nice article. We'll be referencing it throughout the show tonight, but AP News breaks down basically all the different scenarios of who can get to different conference title games, playoff implications, and whatnot. And we're going to start off talking about the college football rankings that just came out, a couple shakeups actually that we'll get into. We'll talk about Miami, of course. Oregon jumps Ole Miss. Does Ole Miss fall out with a loss? And especially with it sounding like Lane Kiffin's going to go to LSU. A ton to talk about, a very important rivalry week. But welcome back, Joe, and how are we?
Coyle, I'm feeling great. This is, as much as it sucks as the last full week of the regular season, this is maybe my favorite college football weekend of the year. We have a ton of awesome games spread out too. That's like what's so good about this weekend too. They do a very good job, in my opinion, of like spreading out the games. Because if all these games are on Saturday, it's only human nature you're going to lose one or two in the shuffle. But the fact that they did a pretty good job spacing out, a lot of these top 25 teams are playing all in, different windows throughout the day, throughout the days, both days. That's really awesome. I'm really looking forward to it. And it even starts, Thursday night, we have Memphis taking on Navy. Not a lot of, not a game too many people will be watching. I know all the sickos out there will, like myself. But Navy wins that game. I think they clinch a spot to go to the American Athletic title game. Navy, one of those teams, we've kind of already said it's going to be between JMU and the American champ for that 12 spot, which right now, that team would be going on to play Texas Tech. But Navy wins that game. They're 9-2 overall, 7-1 in the conference. They wouldn't have played Army. I think they count that game as a non-conference game now.
Yeah.
The Army-Navy game. But that'd be, put them in an interesting spot if North Texas or Tulane were to falter. You could be looking at Navy advancing into that conference championship game spot. But a lot of great games throughout the next couple of days. A lot of good NFL games as well. I know this is a college show, but it's a great weekend of football. We got, I know we've had 42 straight days between MAC-Chin and, the Conference USA games earlier in the year, but these, next 5 days, you got Thursday through Monday night of awesome football, and I can't wait for it.
Yeah, we have a ton of stuff still on the line. And I think that, is another great reason why pretty much everyone is loving the 12-team playoff. Like there's so many games this weekend that still matter, that still are going to play a big role in determining some stuff. Like a lot of people's argument is, well, the conference title doesn't matter as much anymore. Well, tell that to Pitt, tell that to SMU, tell that to Virginia, even tell that to Miami, who is going to be an at-large team potentially. But like any of those other ACC teams, they need to win that just to get into the college football playoff. So we got a lot of stuff that still matters this weekend. But we'll start with talking about the college football playoff rankings. Nothing crazy, I think, jumping off the page this week just because of there wasn't that many outright upsets last week that are going to change some stuff, but we did see a couple things shuffle. Oregon had a really nice victory against USC last week. They jumped Ole Miss. Ole Miss, do they get penalized if Lane Kiffin leaves and they lose this game? Do they to Mississippi State? Do they fall out completely? Notre Dame sitting there at firm at number 9. You have to think if as long as they take care of business against Stanford, that they'll be in. Oklahoma in the same conversation. They can't go to the SEC title game, but if they just knock off LSU at home this week, are they definitely in the playoff? Kind of anything jumping off the page to you to start it off, Joe?
Yeah, I think Notre Dame really, starting with Notre Dame as a Notre Dame fan, you're rooting for like chalk to happen. You want BYU to, if they may either lose this week outright or lose to Texas Tech in, the Big 12 title game, you're rooting for Tennessee to leave no doubt with, if Vandy wins that game, Vandy's 10-2, they got a top 25 win, they could jump up. You hope Miami loses to either Pitt or loses the ACC championship game, because even if Miami just beats Pitt and they still don't get into the ACC title game, that was the entire rankings show that they spent talking about the head to head. And while I agree head to head is really important, you can make the argument too. SMU beat Miami. Why aren't they closer, even though they have another loss? Like, you can make this argument with a lot of teams. I know their records are identical, um, but Notre Dame, they're too. There's just so many factors at play. And I know head to head is big, but the one thing I think that's killing Miami, and every person is, guilty of it as well, in terms of recency bias. Like when you make a ranking and you have these teams, like after Miami lost to Louisville, and then especially after they lost to SMU, I don't think anyone would be sitting there going, "Oh, well, they have to still be one slot ahead of Notre Dame because they won head to head." When Notre Dame was blowing teams out, Notre Dame beat USC. Notre Dame, like it's gonna be really interesting. I think this game against Pitt, like if Miami goes up to Pittsburgh and beats Pitt the way Notre Dame did, then it's going to be like, hey, that's a very common opponent. That's, Notre Dame, with that ranked win over Pitt, they have that win over USC as well, but that'll be a really decent way to compare the two teams. So I think Notre Dame is really rooting for chalk. Coyle, I think if Ole Miss were to lose, kind of how you were saying before, if Ole Miss loses, they're probably out. One, because Mississippi State not that good. We just saw Bama last week. They lost, and dropped all the way down to 10th to Oklahoma, who's currently the 8th team in the country, and they lost that game at home. I know, Ole Miss will be going on the road to Mississippi State, but that, they would definitely get penalized. To where that point, though, I don't see them. You could maybe make an argument if they win close and, Lane leaves. I'm not saying they're going to kick them out of the playoff, but who knows? Maybe Oklahoma jumps them, even though Ole Miss only has one loss, or BYU comes storming in, wins the Big 12. Maybe BYU jumps all the way ahead of them. Then maybe you keep like Texas Tech if they finish 11-1 ahead of them or something like that. But I don't see Ole Miss if they win. If they win, Ole Miss is in no matter what, even if Kiffin and the whole staff leave. So I don't think that will be too much of a problem. But besides that, I mean, and it's really just for seeding in terms of if you're looking at like the top 7 or 8. Obviously, if Oklahoma loses, they'll drop out with 2 losses. But Texas Tech is hoping maybe if Georgia gets in, or A&M loses, maybe Texas Tech jumps up to 4. A&M drops that down to 5. Texas Tech maybe gets a bye. But ultimately, I don't think Texas Tech fans would be too mad with that path they have right now. Getting that home game in the first round against a Tulane or a JMU or whoever wins that game to move on to play Georgia, which Georgia's been incredible and they've definitely turned it around lately, but it's either that or you get Ohio State, the defending champs who are undefeated, Indiana, who's been looking like a wagon this year, and A&M, although they've struggled in a couple of games, they are still sitting there at 11-0. We'll see what happens against Texas this week. But in terms of that, I don't really see – you're really looking more towards like that 8 through 12 spot of the rankings overall. And then in the bracket, it's kind of the same thing. You're fighting for seeding and auto bids and stuff at this point.
Yeah, when you look at, the top 4, seeding can definitely change. One of these teams or 2 of these teams, who knows what happens, could fall out of that top 4. But you look at Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, and Georgia, regardless if all those teams lose this week 63-0, all 4 of those teams will be in the college football playoff. Ohio State obviously playing Michigan this week. Indiana playing Purdue. It should be an easy one there. A&M versus Texas, who has looked a lot better over the second half of the season. I think that's an intriguing game. Texas not 100% dead, probably 95% dead, but still have somewhat of a pulse. And Georgia plays Georgia Tech. Even if they go 10-2, Georgia's going to find themselves to the playoffs. So you look at 4 locks there. You get the G5 lock, and then you have the Big 12 probably champion and the ACC champion, taking up a spot there. So you only got a handful of at-large spots, and we know we're going to see some chaos this week. One thing is bound to really shake it up. If it doesn't, I'll be floored. But you could look at a scenario where both Alabama and Ole Miss, or one of those teams is on the outside looking in. Hell, if Oregon drops to Washington this week, like how impressive really is Oregon's resume? Are they a surefire lock in this thing? Like say BYU were to go to the Big 12 title game and them and Texas Tech play a game down to the wire, and you look at BYU finishing the season, just say if BYU wins that game, do you keep Texas Tech out at 11-2 over an Oregon team? that hasn't really, had that many dominant wins again, or great wins this year against really good teams. Oklahoma, say what you want about LSU and what they've done. It's still a talented LSU roster. Could they knock off Oklahoma and ruin their season? Does Vanderbilt go to Tennessee and beat them? And that's one of the more impressive wins of the year. And they find themselves in the top 25. There's so many different scenarios this week that could happen that could really shake up this picture. But I think you look at on paper, you have 4 automatic locks with the top 4 teams in there right now. They said they could drop out. They can move around a little bit. Notre Dame wins this week. I think it's going to be pretty hard to keep them out unless they were to only beat Stanford by a field goal. But we've seen Notre Dame really keep their foot on the gas against these inferior squads. And then the G5 spot's going to be up for grabs. Too many kind of scenarios there really to get into. But Alabama, did they drop to Auburn? What Alabama team shows up? I think that game is going to be insane. So there's so much on the line still this week, Joe, that could play a big part in what we were seeing with the rankings and obviously the conference title games as well.
Yeah, I mean, especially in the, like you were already saying, like the ACC, Pitt, and we were kind of talking about them going into that game against Notre Dame, but how if they were to win their last 2 games, which they beat Georgia Tech, they're sitting here back in the top 25. If they beat Miami, sitting there at 12, they're playing either SMU or Virginia right now, which is just so funny how you could get SMU again back-to-back years, potentially sneaking into the playoff here. But sitting there, and especially, we'll get to that game later on, but I'm really intrigued to see what happens in the ACC because this will be a big test if Miami does win, but then Virginia and SMU plays at Cal. Virginia hosts, I believe they're hosting Virginia Tech. I don't know whether it's there or in Blacksburg, but I think they're hosting the game. It'll be really interesting with this auto bid rule. You're going to have another year of controversy. Bogart already said it on the rankings broadcast, how he goes, you should just expand this thing to 16, which there's going to come a point, though, kind of like with March Madness when we talk about it. There's always going to be an argument, oh, well, we should expand it because look at this team here, number like Miami, or if they were left out, or if BYU does go 11-1 in the regular season and gets left out again. Like, it sucks, but there's going to be a couple of teams every single year that you can make the argument should get in. But once you eventually expand it so much, it's like regular season loses all its meaning. And then, you're letting in some of these teams. Like if you went to 16 and you're looking at the top 25, there's a couple of teams down there in that like 15, 16 range that you're like, well, they're good, but are they really like, oh my God, good? Like Texas right now at 16, they're 8-3. We all think they're a good team. I don't think they're a great team. Same thing like USC hanging around there right now. Michigan at 9-2. If they lose to Ohio State, they'll be 9-3. Vandy, as awesome as the Pavia story is, and as bad as Vandy's been for so long, that's another team. If they were to lose, they'd be 9-3, kind of sitting there. Tennessee, 19th. A lot of these teams are good, but not teams that you should say or could say should be in the playoff. So ultimately, I think that's going to be really fascinating because I think Miami's a good team, but all these fans, complaining about Miami not being in, don't lose to Louisville at home. Don't lose to SMU on the road, fine. They're currently a top 25 team. That is what it is. But Louisville at home is now quickly turning into a loss that is not one, like that's a bad loss that you have on your resume right now. Louisville sitting there at 7-4, 4-4 in the ACC. And, the ACC is not what it used to be. Coming off, I think it's got smoked at SMU as well. Like at the end of the day, win that game against Louisville, this isn't even a conversation right now. Miami would be ahead of Notre Dame. Miami would be a lock, and Notre Dame would be that team right there on the bubble. So I'm just really fascinated. This week there's still so much up for grabs with only 1 week left, where in years past with like the BCS system, you're like, all right, well, it's between like 3 schools. And yes, those games would still mean a lot, but the amount of games that matter even more now, like who would be talking about SMU Cal this week without the playoff? Like that's the kind of stuff that like I love the fact that we went to 12 and we have all the power conference champs getting a bid and the group of 5 team getting a bid. That's why like I just think this is so cool. Like you still have so much chaos scenarios possible. Like the ACC could have 6 teams tied for first. Like that's what's really cool, and that's what's really special about this weekend coming up.
All right. Well, we usually for the rivalry week try to hit on every matchup that has some semblance of meaning, but just with the 12-team playoff now, there's just too many games. We would be on here breaking down 25, 30 different games this week. So pick the best five of the week. We're going to touch on a bunch of different scenarios, within the matchups, but we're going to start on Friday in the SEC. You got number 3 Texas A&M. They are 11-0. 7-0 in the SEC. They will be traveling to Austin to play number 16 Texas, 8-3, 5-2. Texas coming off by far their best offensive performance of the year, and it's against an Arkansas team that has really struggled this year, obviously on that defensive side of the ball. But Arch has looked the most comfortable that he's looked, and goes back to, I think, the main conversation like going into the season. Like, sure, he is a talented player. Sure, he's got the last name, and the hype was all there. But it was a guy that played for a cup of coffee last year in the SEC, and he had all this pressure, all this expectations on him. You've seen he's definitely gotten better throughout the year. And is he a perfect player? No, but last week by far his best week, 6 touchdowns, nearly 400 yards. He caught one, he ran for one, and he just started taking some more shots down the field. It was a very poor Arkansas defense, a lot of wide open plays on the field, but that offense is looking as good as it has, I think, kind of all season. But they have a big test this week with this Texas A&M team. You look at the scenarios, though, for the SEC. Like I said at the beginning, sitting there at 16, Texas needs a bunch of chaos, but they knock off this undefeated A&M team. They're definitely going to have a seat at the table, given what goes on in championship week as well. But scenarios for the SEC. So Texas A&M, they win the SEC, or they win this game at Texas. They will go to the SEC championship game. But the article does touch on if the Aggies lose, they are vulnerable because they played a weak in-conference schedule, and that tiebreaker would come into play here if there's a 3 or 4-way tie. So a couple other scenarios. If Texas A&M loses, it would still make the title game if both Alabama and Ole Miss lose. So A&M is rooting, for Mississippi State on Friday. That game's at noon. This game's at 7. Alabama is in with a win and out with a loss, so no real beating around the bush there. Georgia is in if either Alabama or Texas A&M loses. And Mississippi is in Ole Miss is in if it wins and both Alabama and Texas A&M lose. So the most likely scenario here is that you get a Texas A&M versus Alabama title game if both of the favorites win. But I'd be shocked if everything goes to chalk. So we'll start it off with the Friday night game, Joe. I'm here with A&M and Texas. Who do you like in this one?
I'm going Texas here 24-17. I'll take Texas plus 2.5, under 59.5. Coyle, I mean, you hit it right on the head with Arch improving as a quarterback. Texas, improving as a team. They had some tough losses, at Ohio State, not an easy place to play. At Georgia, not an easy place to play. That's number 1 and number 4. They have a bad loss against Florida. That was on the road, though, as well. Texas undefeated at home. You get a rival coming into town. That place is going to be rocking. We saw how it was last year for A&M Texas. I picked A&M last year because of that fact. And I remember sitting on my couch watching as Texas A&M came out. They were playing Kanye West. That place was insane. I can imagine that's going to be the same way in Austin. Coyle, looked like you guys saw a great crowd for a 2-8 Arkansas team coming to town. I can't imagine how it's going to be for Thanksgiving weekend against your biggest rival who you didn't get to play for years, and you get a chance to spoil a shot at their perfect season and a shot at the SEC title, which would be a first for A&M coming in since they were, moved over to the SEC. So I am going to go Texas here, 24-17. I think A&M is very good, but I think we've also seen some examples of A&M kind of playing with their food a little bit. I know they step up in the big games, like they won at Notre Dame earlier in the year. I'm certainly not saying they're a bad team in any way, shape, or form, but I think going on the road at Texas, this is a different animal, and you have a team that's just so wired to beat you. And it's also tough when you're going undefeated, you're trying to stay undefeated, you start to get so tense. Even against a rival, when you're going to be up for this game, it's still going to be a tough spot. That's why I'm going with the Horns.
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on it too, Joe, where A&M, it's hard to navigate that SEC schedule and go 11-0. But I think if you look at one of these top teams, I think A&M has some of the most flaws just in terms of kind of their consistency. And they've had a few come-from-behind efforts, comeback efforts that have been impressive. But then they also have the Arkansas game where they only win by a few points. And we just saw this Texas team. I know you can't compare each matchup to each other, but Texas took care of them from the start and put them away early. What A&M team shows up, Obviously, it's a motivated team. They have a chance to go and win the SEC title. I don't think anyone predicted that coming into the year. I had liked A&M going into the year. I thought they were more so kind of what like Vandy or Tennessee is, like a 9-3, sitting there on the bubble come Selection Sunday for the tournament or for the playoff. But here they are sitting 11-0, and they have a chance to completely end Texas' season. Texas coming into the year as the number one team in the country, missing the playoff entirely would be majorly disappointed. So all the motivation there for the Aggies, but I do think we see some chaos, and we said it at the beginning where this A&M team, regardless of the result of this game, will be in the college football playoff, but will they not go to the SEC title game is what they're kind of facing going into this. And is that the end of the world if they don't? People are kind of discrediting these games now, but if you're a competitor, if you have that championship kind of mentality in you, you want to go out there, you want to win this game. Obviously, you want to go to the SEC title game. And I don't think Mike Elko is walking into this game like brushing it aside, like all full steam ahead for this matchup. But I do like Texas to get the upset. I think Texas and this offense is clicking at a higher rate than they have before this entire season. Georgia defense, I think, is getting back to that championship level, and they were a bit of an outlier for Texas. But I think A&M's defense isn't that elite. I think they've shown that they can get scored on throughout the season, and the offense has really impressed for A&M more so. And I think going into the year, everyone would have expected the defense to be the one to carry that team. But I think Texas just has the chance to kind of add some chaos to the mix, give themselves a seat at the table with that 9-3 record, with a couple of really big wins, big performances. And I like them to knock off this Texas A&M team this week at home. You're giving me points there. I definitely like the 2.5. Could A&M win it at the buzzer on a field goal? Sure, I could see that, but I'm going to take the Longhorns to win this one, and I think we get some points as well. Give me 31-28 Texas. Texas plus 2.5 over 51.5, and we have our first kind of chaos of the week there. So with that scenario, Joe, with both of us having A&M lose, they would still make the title game. If both Alabama and Ole Miss lose, which is definitely very possible. But if Georgia is in, if either Alabama or Texas A&M loses. So if Texas A&M loses this game, Georgia is in regardless, because Georgia is playing an ACC game this week against Georgia, or a non-conference game against an ACC team in Georgia Tech. So in this scenario, Joe, we would both have A&M out of the SEC title game and sitting at home next weekend. So first kind of chaos there of the week. We'll go to Saturday now, the biggest matchup of the week, maybe the biggest matchup of the season. All eyes on this one. Number one, Ohio State, 11-0, 8-0, going to the playoff regardless if they win this one or not. But they'll be playing number 15, Michigan, 9-2, 7-1 in the Big Ten. Michigan wins this game. I think they go to the playoff for sure. Noon kick on Fox. Ohio State's a 9.5-point favorite, over under 44.5. Obviously, we know last year Ohio State is a 20.5-point favorite, drops that game to Michigan, but then they eventually go on to win the Big Ten title game. You look at the Big Ten scenarios here, they're a little bit more cut and dry than some of these other conferences, but if Ohio State beats Michigan, the Buckeyes face Indiana in the title game. This is true even if the Hoosiers lose to Washington, lose to Purdue, because Indiana would win a tiebreaker with Oregon for the second slot if need be. If Michigan beats Ohio State and Indiana and Oregon both win, the title game would be Indiana versus Oregon. Michigan beats Ohio State, Indiana wins, and Oregon loses, the title game would be Indiana versus Michigan. So you still have a chance there for Michigan after everything to make the Big Ten title game. If Michigan beats Ohio State, Oregon wins, and Indiana loses, the title game would be Michigan versus Oregon. If Michigan beats Ohio State and Oregon and Indiana both lose, the title game would be Michigan versus Ohio State, which would be pretty wild there. But we have a lot of eyes going to be on this one, probably the most watched college football game of the season. Can Ohio State finally get over this hump here with Michigan?
I think they will. I thought that last year at home, but we saw that happen. I'm going Ohio State 27, Michigan 14. So I'm going to take Ohio State minus the 9.5. I'm going to go with the under in this game of 44.5. And I think this will be a game that's tight throughout. I think Ohio State's defense is going to make a play late. Bryce Underwood's going to have an interception or a fumble or a boneheaded freshman mistake, throw the game away. Ohio State will capitalize, finish this game off. I think they'll win, what will end up being a low-scoring game. And then you'll have the, Michigan fans, you'll see Portnoy being like, oh, the game actually doesn't matter. Game matters a whole lot. Ohio State, win this game. You're number one. You're 12-0. You got a chance to play. You got a chance to have number one versus number two for the Big Ten title game a week from now. That I think would be pretty cool. And I think that will happen. I think you're going to get Ohio State winning this game here, leaving no doubt, officially knocking Michigan out of the playoffs, off of that bubble where there's a bunch of teams right now, Coyle. I know we've talked about it already enough, but that still have paths to make this playoff. I think Michigan will lose this game, though.
Yeah, the weather forecast I saw, it's going to be in like the low 30s, high 20s, snowing. It's just setting up there for a perfect kind of Michigan recipe to help eliminate that Ohio State high-flying passing attack. But I think the difference with this Ohio State team and the teams of the past few years, they're not just fully dependent on having to air it out. And the running game, I think that's their biggest flaw, but that defense, you can argue, is the best in the country. If this game has to be 14-13, I think Ohio State still has the capability of winning that game. Julian saying, though, his first matchup in this game against Michigan, what is he like? How does he perform under pressure? I think he's been calm, cool, and collected all year, but Ohio State has really kind of just ran through their entire schedule this year. What do they do against this tough Michigan team? But also Michigan, when you look at them, who have they really beaten this year? Who have they outperformed? And I think talent-wise, Ohio State's on a different level than this Michigan squad. But I did hear Urban Meyer talking about it today on the Herd with Colin Cowherd, and he basically said, if you're Michigan, your entire goal in this game is just to shorten this game. Make this game a one-possession game going into the fourth quarter and give yourself a shot. He said he would roll up, tape Bryce Underwood's ankles double, both ankles, give him a neck roll, and basically say, we're going to run you 20 to 25 times. Just get us to 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3 every drive, and we're going to get first downs and kind of just move the ball down the field. Don't let that Ohio State high-flying offense have chances to just hit you over the top time after time. So can Michigan control the tempo? Can Michigan control the style of this game? That'll give them the best chance in this matchup. But at the end of the day, I think the streak has to end at some time. And I think it's one of the more over talked about things in all of college football. Sure, Ohio State needs to beat Michigan. It's the biggest matchup on their calendar each year. But Ohio State, for our entire lifetime, Joe, has owned this rivalry. Like, Ohio State won this matchup year after year after year, 9, 10 years in a row, whatever it was. Now Michigan is starting to get the better half of them, but I still think Ohio State is the upper echelon program, the better program in college football. And I think they find a way to get this one done here. You're going to give me 9.5 points, though. I do think Michigan has the capability, if they follow that formula, to keep this close. So I'm going to take Ohio State to win just by 7. So we'll go with Michigan to cover. But give me Ohio State 24, Michigan 17. So Michigan plus 9.5, under 44.5. Ohio State to the Big Ten title game, and eliminate any questions there about Michigan and if they deserve to go to the college football playoff. All right, we go to the ACC now. We have on Saturday at noon. We'll see how many eyeballs are on this game, but you got number 12 Miami at 9-2, 5-2 in the ACC in the college football playoff as of today. They'll be playing number 22 Pitt, who is 8-3, 6-1 in the ACC. Miami is a 6.5 point favorite. Over under is 51.5, and the ACC has a little bit more chaos than some of the other conferences. So the scenarios for the ACC: Virginia and SMU can each wrap up a spot in the ACC title game with a win this week. So Virginia against Virginia Tech, SMU against Cal. Both those teams win. Both of those teams are favored. I think SMU by 13.5, Virginia by 8.5. They're both in the ACC title game. Pitt can make it with a win and either a loss by Virginia or SMU. So Pitt needs to knock off Miami in this one and have some help by either Virginia or SMU by losing. The two lost teams have to hope to get into a tiebreaker of some sort, it says, which could be decided by strength of schedule within the conference. So Miami still has somewhat of a chance, but their more likely chance to get to the playoff is just by getting an at-large spot sitting there at 2 losses. So any chaos you think on your mind in this matchup, Joe, between Pitt and Miami?
I do think Pitt is going to win this game. I was kind of alluding to it a little bit when we were talking about it. We have seen Miami a bunch of times down the stretch. We've talked about it all season. I said it in the week 1 preview. I thought Miami was going to win. I picked Notre Dame, so I'm a Notre Dame fan, but I'm like, Miami will win that Notre Dame game when they're all hyped. But at the end of the year, when they fall apart like they have done year after year after year, it won't really matter. And I think they're going to lose this game in Pittsburgh. Coyle, you were talking about the weather in Columbus, Ohio, and Pitt. It's going to be a little bit warmer, but not a whole lot. This says it's going to be cloudy, 35 degrees, chance of flurries. A lot of those kids from Miami are not looking forward to going up and playing in the cold. I think this Pitt crowd is going to be rocking. You're going to have, because once again, you have a chance to make the playoffs if you're Pitt. And I do think the fact that Narduzzi said a couple weeks ago, we don't care about this Notre Dame game. We only care about the rest of the conference. I thought he was kind of crazy, but then they go out and you beat Georgia Tech on the road by 2 touchdowns. You have a chance now coming home to play Miami. Carson Beck, I think he's good. I don't think he's incredible. But ultimately, I think Pitt's going to win this game 35-28. It'll be close, but I think that'll officially shut the door on Miami and then, keep Pitt's hopes alive at for an ACC title berth and then potentially even a college football playoff berth.
Yeah, I'm rolling with Pitt in this one too, Joe. I think outside of that Notre Dame game, which is an outlier because Notre Dame has been really dominant since those first 2 losses earlier in the season, Pitt has been, just as good. That was one of the more impressive performances last week of the entire week against Georgia Tech, really dismantling them at Georgia Tech ever since they made this change over to this freshman quarterback. This has been a very different Pitt team, and it's a Miami scenario where if Miami wins, it's looking like they're probably going to be in the college football playoff. But when Miami's had pressure on them and they've had some of these big games down the stretch of the season with Mario Cristobal, they fell flat in this game. And I agree with you. An ugly weather game, cold environment up there in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is going to be a different animal for this Miami squad and make them a little bit uncomfortable. So I like Pitt to win this one outright too at home. As we said, there's going to need to be some chaos, but that's one of my bold predictions of the weekend. Pitt wins this game over Miami, and one of SMU or Virginia loses to put Pitt into the ACC title game. One of my bold predictions for chaos this weekend. So I love the Panthers to win this week 30-27, Pitt plus 6.5 over 51.5. And rivalry week is delivering some chaos for sure so far in our matchups. 2 more matchups to get into. Vandy 9-2, 5-2 in the SEC at Tennessee, who's 8-3 and 4-3. The rankings for this one: Vandy at 14, Tennessee at 19 in our latest projections. Neither of these teams has a chance to go to the SEC title game, but Vandy, Joe, I think if they find a way to go to Tennessee, that's a very impressive win for a Tennessee team where you look at Tennessee and the only losses they have this year, who is it? Alabama, Georgia, and the third loss off the top of my head, but they have like some of the better losses of any team in the country thus far. Vanderbilt finds a way to 10-2, and they don't find their way to the college football playoff. I'm going to be pretty sick about that.
Yeah, Coyle, I'm with you. I mean, that should almost be like the community should almost be like, hey, Vandy went 10-2. I don't care if they played, Central Connecticut State 10 times. That's impressive for Vanderbilt. They should, end up going to the playoff, especially just the story. And at the end of the day, and my one conspiracy theory always when it comes down to like these teams, whether it be college basketball, college football, it is an entertainment product. And one thing that people talk about, he's polarizing whether you like him or not, is Diego Pavia. Everyone's talking about Pavia, how he's brought so much attention to Vanderbilt. His mom, doing the Heisman pose on the sideline. Everyone's got comments about that. If you go in and win this game against a top 20 Tennessee team, Coyle, you and I were in Tennessee last year for that Tennessee-Kentucky game. That place is insane. I can't imagine. This is probably going to be the biggest crowd for a Vandy Tennessee game in years. So I think ultimately, though, as much as I would love to see Vandy pull off this upset, I don't think they're going to be able to. I have Tennessee 28, Vandy 16. I just think the environment in Knoxville is going to be the difference here. Vanderbilt, we saw, when they went to Bama. Bama's a very good team, don't get me wrong. You lose 30-14. They were getting killed at Texas until they had to storm back and win. They looked great against Kentucky last week, but that's a Kentucky team, in my opinion. Even though they still have a shot to make the playoff, not make the playoff, make a bowl game if they go to 6-6. That is just not a very good Kentucky team. You getting them at home there, I think, is very big. Ultimately, going on the road here against Tennessee is going to be a little bit too much. And I think this will be an ugly, looking game for for Vanderbilt. They'll score a touchdown to make it look a little closer than the game actually is. But I think this is going to be one of those games. And we've kind of said it before, Cole, talking about like college sports, like, oh, Tennessee smoked or like bullied Vanderbilt. Like we should have seen this coming, even though Vandy was so good. That's just what I'm getting the feeling with this game. I think this has been an awesome season for Pavia. I hope Vandy goes into whatever bowl game they go into. You win that game, you go 10-3. I don't know the last time that Vandy won 10 games in a season. I don't even know if it happened this century, but this is an incredible, year for Vandy. And I mean, I'm looking forward. I hope Clark Lee stays. That's all I know.
Yeah, and the odds are stacked against Vandy. As of after the rankings came out, they're only plus 300 to make the playoffs. So, going to need some chaos in front of them. Like they're heavily rooting for Miami to lose, drop out of one of those at large spots. They lose it. They're rooting for like Bama to lose. That would probably knock them out. Ole Miss for sure. They're rooting to lose. But the only thing that Vandy can control is going out there and winning the game themselves. And I think you touched on it where college football, it's part of the entertainment industry. You're always looking for stories. You're looking for storylines. What better story than one of the more polarizing figures in college football of the past 5 to 10 years in Diego Pavia going to rival Tennessee and knocking off Tennessee and, giving them one more chance to get to the college football playoff. Sure, they're going to need some other things to happen and shake out, but they do everything that they can. They go to Tennessee, they win, they go to 10-2, and I think they have a legitimate conversation to go to the college football playoff. I think we get that storyline. I think Diego delivers, and he gives one more kind of great moment. Do they go to the college football playoff? Remains to be seen. But I still think that's a wildly successful season for them to go 10-2, go to Tennessee and knock them off, and really kind of silence the haters one more time. Diego Pavia is a guy that's been doubted his entire football career, his entire college football career, and he's made Vandy relevant. And for as long as we've lived, Joe, and watched football, I don't think that was ever possible. And for him and Clark Lee to be able to kind of pair up and make this magic kind of happen over the past 2 seasons has been one of the cooler things to watch in my time being a college football fan. So I'm rooting for Vandy this week, and I do think they have a legitimate chance on the field to win this too. Tennessee, though, you touched on it. Even though they can't go to the college football playoff, most likely sitting with a win at 9-3, they still have a chance to ruin their rival season there in Vanderbilt, and not let Vanderbilt be the king of the state and the number one team in the state for this year. So there's still motivation there, but I do like Vandy to win. I'm going to take them on a pretty crazy game. I think the game we're going to talk about next, Alabama-Auburn, has the chance to be one of the crazier games of the year, but I think this one's going to be really fun back and forth to kind of set us up into that. So give me Vandy 34, Tennessee 33, win on a last-second field goal. Vandy plus 3.5, and cash the over at the buzzer as well at 65.5. All right, final matchup of the week of the regular season. Sad to say that. But number 10, Alabama, 9-2, 6-1 in the SEC. They'll be traveling to Auburn, 5-6, 1-6. Maybe the best 5-6 football team I can remember, just in terms of how many close games they've played. Like, you look at all those stats, they have them in the NFL all the time. Like, if you had one-score games, like, flip the opposite way, this Auburn team might be sitting here at like 9-2 this season. That's how many close games they've been in. And they played an FCS school last week in Mercer, but they put the 5-star kid in, Deuce Knight, maybe the quarterback that they should have been letting play the entire season, and he lights it up. Now he gets a chance to, in his first game, legitimate game as an Auburn quarterback, to take down Alabama and knock them out of the college football playoff. 7:30 kick on ABC, Bama minus 6.5, over 46.5. I just think this one has the potential to get real weird, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, especially the Iron Bowl is always crazy, but especially when it's at Auburn. You have obviously the kick six. You have the game, I think it was 2019, Coyle. That game where, yeah, I think it was 2019 because I think it was Najee Harris was still in college. I think it might have been Mac Jones through, like, they were going run a fade or something like that, right on the, not a fade, I'm sorry. They were running the ball, hit off Najee's back on the goal line, and they picked it off. It bounced off his back, and they picked it on the goal line, ran it 100 yards. Auburn ended up winning that game. A couple of years ago,
yeah,
had
with
Bill Rowe
Rowe.
needed the game winner. Then I think it was the COVID year, like the 5 overtime game. And I remember Alabama walking it off doing a crane kick. I think they had to go like 99 yards to score the game tying touchdown. So you have a lot of crazy moments at Auburn. That being said, I think it's going to be another crazy game. I think Alabama is going to pull it off, though. I have this game 45-42, and I'm actually calling my shot that this game is going to go to overtime. I will find a prop, or I will find a book that I could bet this game to go to overtime. I will take Auburn plus 6.5. I'm going to go over 46.5. This game is just always chaotic, especially at Auburn. I do not anticipate this game being like, a huge, huge blowout. And also, as good as this Bama team has seemed, they have that loss to Florida State and others at the beginning of the year. But also last year, we thought Bama was going to be just fine to make the playoff, and then they went on the road to Oklahoma late in the year against an Oklahoma team that was not very good. I think they were also like 5-5 or something like that.
Yep.
And they what was it 24-3, or maybe they
Yeah.
scored
No
maybe
shit.
24-10. Yeah, it was like they weren't even close. Like it was a much worse of a game than the score indicated. So I wouldn't be shocked if Bama goes in and loses this game, and you're gonna have Bama fans once again you know, clamoring they should still be in because the SEC is the SEC and all that stuff. And you're going to have people arguing about Alabama. And then, this is a big game for Kalen DeBoer because Bama fans are crazy enough that if they lose this game, you will have some of them saying that he should be on the hot seat. I don't think Kalen DeBoer should be on the hot seat. I just want that very clear. But
Back
if
to
he
back years,
loses,
not making the playoff at
I
Bama.
say back-to-back years not making a 12-team playoff at Bama is something that the fans will not be too happy about.
And especially
Um,
like the down the stretch play, like they controlled their own destiny, back
Yeah,
to back
back to
years
back
now.
years. If they'd just beaten Oklahoma, they would have been in last year. Then you had to see and that's the thing that stung too was SMU. No offense to SMU, but SMU being that last team in over Bama definitely hurt Bama fans as well. Just because who the heck is SMU? But I think Bama's going to win this game. I think they'll go. They'll be finished 10-2. They'll still get a playoff spot. Who knows? If they win this game and they go on and end up winning the SEC, they could still jump in and get a home playoff game in the first round. I don't think they'll be able to jump all the way up to get a bye unless there's a lot of chaos. But I think Bama, if they win this game, they're just fine. And if you win this game, we kind of saw the precedent last year, which kept Bama out. Going to be tough to knock a team if they're already in that top 12, if you're playing in a conference title game, out of the 12-team playoff. So I think Bama gets this one done.
Yeah, this one I think we see the craziest game of the week. In your scenario, you have Alabama winning, so you would have them playing Georgia in the SEC title game. I'm gonna go with Auburn. I think we get some chaos here, and I think Auburn delivers. I said at the beginning that Auburn might be the best 5-win team I've seen in college football in my life because that defense is legit. The offense has really struggled this year, but when they put it together in spurts, you could see kind of the flashes, and they just have struggled to win these close games. One-score games go the other way. This is a 9-10 win team potentially going into this game. What does the future of Auburn football look like is one of the more polarizing questions, I think, of this offseason because their head coaching rumors have definitely been more quiet than the LSU and the Florida. Like they're not in the Lane Kiffin running at all. Sounds like they're going to get John Summerall maybe is what sounds like the most, but he's also very openly talked about how much he enjoys being at Tulane and maybe even stays there. So Auburn is going to be something to watch over the course of the offseason. But if Auburn finds a way to win this game, if they're able to retain that talent, that the young talent that they have on offense in that really strong defense, it could be a team that sets themselves up for some major success going into the offseason. So I think we get a ton of chaos in this one, but I'm going to go with Auburn. And the one thing that makes me weary about this, besides it being a 5-win Auburn team, is I think Alabama, when they've been able to take their foot off the gas in scenarios under Kalen DeBoer, is where you've seen them slip up. But when they've had the full amount of pressure on them, like last year against LSU or this year against Georgia, when they've really had to hone in and focus, that's when they've won games. But when they've been able to take their foot off the gas a little bit, and like the Oklahoma game, whereas, they didn't have to win that game, as we know right here, if they win this one, they're still in the SEC title game. It wasn't the end of the world. But this one, if they lose this game, it is the end of the world. And DeBoer, they're going to be calling for his head. They're going to be calling for him to get fired if they lose this game. So a ton of pressure on Alabama. But I just think we get a little bit too much chaos this week in college football. And I think Auburn finds a way to get it done and give us one of the more shocking results of the year. I'm going to go with Auburn to win. I think it could definitely go to overtime, like you said. But I'm going to go Auburn 38-35, Auburn plus 6.5, over 46.5. I think we see a couple pick sixes, like a strip sack, kick return, punt return, a few crazy plays in this one to really turn this game on its head. So in my scenario there for the SEC, I would actually have it being a Georgia versus A&M. I don't even know. I have too much Chris. I have Georgia versus Ole Miss because I have Ole Miss winning the Egg Bowl. So that would be probably the least likely scenario to happen. But My scenario would be Georgia, Ole Miss, but it's college football. That's what we get the chaos for. To wrap it up, we'll go with our dog of the day and our lock of the week, and then we'll obviously be back next week doing conference title games. But dog of the day, we have my pick. I'll go with Arizona State plus 1.5 at home versus Arizona. Hat tip to both these teams. Arizona for all the struggles that they've gone through in terms of injuries this year, and to still be sitting here with still a pulse to potentially make the Big 12 title game, another team that really needs some chaos. But hat tip to them. And Arizona, they've been one of the more kind of comeback teams of the year, sitting here at 8-3. A really good matchup that I don't think is getting talked about enough because it doesn't have super big implications on the playoff. But Arizona State being that 1.5 point underdog at home, Kenny Dillingham, you give him any roster in college football, any of these top talented rosters, I might take him, honestly. Like, besides like Kirby Smart and maybe like Marcus Freeman, pound for pound, just straight up coaching, that dude could coach his ass off. So I think he gets his team motivated, ready to go, with still a chance to go to the Big 12 title game. If some chaos breaks loose, he's not going to let them slip up in this one. Rivalry game, I'm going to take Arizona State plus 1.5 at home. Like them to win that one outright.
Yeah, for my dog of the day, I am going with Washington plus 7 at home against Oregon. I know this is a rivalry game, but I do think, I've been kind of saying it all year. When you have multiple like these big ranked games, Oregon needed to win against USC last week to kind of put themselves and say, hey, we belong here. Now you have to go to Washington, a team that their whole goal is to ruin your season. This is a big rivalry game. This is now going to be your permanent, end of the season rivalry game, with Oregon State no longer being in, the same conference as Oregon. So I think Washington being at home, this is going to be a close game. I still think Oregon could pull this out. I still think they're going to win, but I think it's going to be within a touchdown. I could see them winning by a field goal, winning, by like 6 points, something weird. But I think Washington covers that 7 points.
I like that too. Beginning of the year, I had that actually as an upset. And I think if Washington wins that game, I think there's a good chance we see Oregon on the outside looking in for the playoff. Lock of the week time, fair bet of the week. I'm going to go with Missouri and Arkansas over 57.5. It's kind of bold to take a Missouri team. I just scored 6 points last week, but that's against an Oklahoma defense that's one of the best in the country. This Arkansas defense can't stop a nosebleed. They're fully out on the season. That team is fully given up, fully quit, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But offensively, they can still put up some points. They can still score. So I think that they go out there. They're able to move the ball a little bit down the field. But Missouri really takes advantage of this porous Arkansas defense. So Missouri, Arkansas over 57.5 for my lock of the week.
I am going to go with the Mississippi State Bulldogs plus 7.5 at home against Ole Miss. Egg Bowl Friday at noon. I think they definitely cover that 7.5. You look at, Mississippi State at home compared to when they go on the road, they're a totally different team. When they're at home, they beat Arizona State, who's currently a top 25 football team. They almost beat Tennessee. They lost that game by a touchdown. You lose to Texas in overtime. Georgia at home a couple weeks ago was a tough one. But I think this game at Egg Bowl, big rivalry, especially with all the rumors with Kiffin leaving, especially if he is going to leave, that's definitely got to be distracting for Ole Miss, especially in a day and age where loyalty doesn't matter anymore, especially in the NIL era where kids can just hop schools whenever they want. I think this, that will have an effect, even if he ends up staying. So I think Mississippi State will be able to keep it within a score, and that could be a game late. You're getting the ESPN alert, like Ole Miss down, 3 points with the ball with like a minute 27 left or something like that. So I'm going to go with Mississippi State plus 7.5.
Yeah, and like you touched on at the beginning, Joe, a really fun few days of football coming up here for sure. We got – who do we got? We got Ole Miss, Mississippi State at noon. You got the Eagles at 3:30 versus the Bears. You got Georgia Tech Friday. You got Texas A&M, and then we got Saturday as well. Obviously, the Thanksgiving game's on Thursday. But a bunch of great football coming up over these next few days. Pretty insane how we're already here at Thanksgiving. We got conference title games breakdown next week, but it's sure to be a lot of chaos coming up this week. But appreciate everyone for tuning in. Thank you as always. Enjoy your Thanksgiving, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy out there. Please please subscribe, and we'll talk next week for some conference title games.